Okay, welcome. Everybody hear me okay? All right, my name is Jeff Roberta. I work for RK&K, and we are supporting Queen Anne's County and the Baltimore Metropolitan Council with this study. So thank you again. Welcome to the US 5301 Pedestrian Overpass Feasibility Study public meeting. We are going to go through a short presentation here. The information that's in the presentation is the same as the information that's going to be presented on the boards around the room. So I want to give you a little bit of just logistics and ground rules here. We'll do a short presentation. We're not going to do Q&A on the presentation itself. Afterwards, we'll be available at the boards to talk through any details you may have on what's been studied to date. We would like to take note that what we really want coming out of the meeting tonight is your feedback on the options we're considering. So there's a couple of ways to do that. There's a comment box here. You can provide written comments on comment forms over there. That would be great. There are maps on the tables and over on the boards over to my left here where you could put sticky notes, give your thoughts on any of the details of the options that we're considering, anything you think is important that we should factor in as we move forward with the study. You can also follow up after this meeting. There's contact information here on how you can provide comments. We'll be collecting comments from the public for the next 2 weeks, so feel free to think about things or provide additional comments after you leave here tonight. And the last thing, I promised Lauren I would do this. If you haven't done so when you came in, if you didn't sign in, please do that before you leave. It's really good that we record everybody who came to the meetings. All right, with that, I will jump into the details of the presentation here. I would maybe take five or 6 minutes to go through that, and then we'll jump over to the boards. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. So a little bit of background. This is the latest in a series of studies that the county has done looking at a shared use or pedestrian overpass of US 5301 in this area of Kent Island to connect the Cross Island Trail with the South Island Trail. So that connection is part of the county comprehensive plan. It's also part of the bike and ped master plan. So it's something that the county's been considering for a long time. What has been done in this study is to advance several options, studied in more detail to identify what would ultimately be a preferred option that could be carried forward. So talked a little bit about the purpose here. Let's go to this map. This is a very schematic map that showed the 4 options that were evaluated as part of this study. So they're shown here in different colors. I'm going to go over them very high level. Again, they're in detail here on the boards, and we can talk more detail about each of them. But there's 4 options. Option 1, the one that's shown in purple here, is furthest to the west. This would be a new overpass to the west of Maryland 8. So in the vicinity of the Chesapeake Bay Beach Club Inn. So it would connect to the paths that are in Terrapin Nature Park. It would go along Pier 1 Road, ultimately Maryland 8, and tie into the existing South Island Trail. The second option we studied, option 2, is what's shown in blue here. That would utilize the Maryland 8 alignment. So the path would go from the South Island Trail along Maryland 8 and tie into the Cross Island Trail north of Stevensville. That option would be predicated on what happens with MDTA's Bay Crossing study. As you know, they're studying a new bridge across the Chesapeake Bay, and that would include improvements along 5301, which potentially would be reconstructing the Maryland 8 overpass. We would only consider option 2 if a new overpass was constructed, and we'll get into more details of that in a minute. Option 3, shown in yellow, would be a crossing to the east of Maryland 8. So again, it would connect to the South Island Trail, same vicinity as options 1 and 2. It would cross just like across Thompson Creek Road and go across US 5301 and tie in to Stevensville. And then the last option, option 4, shown in red, would be further to the east. It would cross 5301 just to the west of Cox Creek. Actually, the tie-in would be just outside here into the connection of the Cross Island Trail right here at the library. So those are the 4 options that we were evaluating. I'm going to give a couple details about these options. I'll start here with option 1. I want to remind you again, we'll go over this again, but all of this is on the boards, and we'll have a chance to talk through these specific details with you, show them the details on the maps. So when you look at option 1, again, we mentioned it. This would be a direct connection to Terrapin Park. which doesn't exist today. So it will be an overpass that will connect directly into Terrapin Park. And so the connection between the Cross Island Trail and the South Island Trail will be through the park. This would provide better access to properties that are west of Maryland 8, so that includes Chesapeake Bay Beach Club, the Inn at Chesapeake Bay Beach Club, as well as residential areas in the Chesapeake Bay Business Park, which are on the west side of Maryland 8. This is obviously the closest to the Chesapeake Bay, and that's one thing we want to consider when we know that MDTA is studying, their bridge replacement project. We need to think about that proximity and the interaction of a potential overpass here with anything they may be considering. So option 2 we mentioned was a trail along Maryland 8. And this is not a preferred way to go for a couple of reasons. There's not a good opportunity to put a trail on the existing overpass bridge. It's not wide enough to accommodate a trail safely with a proper kind of connection between the shared use path and the traveling public. The approaches to the bridge don't support a shared use path, and then there's the crossings of the interchange ramps there, the multiple crossings of the interchange ramps, which is not desirable. So we would only consider, as we mentioned, option 2, if Maryland 8 were to be, that bridge were to be reconstructed and could be constructed with a wider typical section to provide enough room for a shared use path. Even so, it's still not preferred because of the safety and the user concerns. A trail along Maryland 8 is not a very pleasant experience if you want to use a shared use path, and then there still would be crossings of interchange ramps at grade, which is not something that we would prefer. So through consultation with the county, as we looked at this one and more, it was determined that option 2 would not be carried further. So you'll see here tonight we do not have details of option 2. That's one that's no longer being considered. We did study it, just want you to know where we stand. We reached a similar conclusion on option 3. So again, this is the crossing that is to the east of Maryland 8. The issues with this crossing location are really twofold. Number one, it doesn't provide the connectivity between the Cross Island Trail and the South Island Trail, since this connection ends within Stevensville, and there's not the existing shared use path or pedestrian infrastructure within the town that connects where the overpass would be to the existing Cross Island Trail. And it would be very expensive, be a lot of right-of-way and property impacts to construct that portion of the trail within Stevensville. So it doesn't provide that ideal connectivity that's the purpose of this study. Also, as many of you know, along eastbound US 5301, there are high-tension towers and electric lines that run parallel to US 5301. This option would cross those lines and, in fact, would impact one or more of the high-tension towers. We don't view that as a realistic approach to have such a large impact for this type of structure. So for that reason, option 3 is also not being carried forward. So option 4, as we mentioned, this is the option that's furthest east. This would be the most direct connection between the Cross Island Trail and the South Island Trail, because it would start right here at the Cross Island Trail, and then it would be relatively direct to the existing South Island Trail. This does also tie to the community that's along Thompson Creek Road. There's a shared use path there. There's also some commercial businesses there. It would require a crossing, so a second bridge to cross Thompson Creek. So that's something to consider here. There are environmental considerations there and cost considerations of having a secondary crossing. But again, we viewed that one as feasible, and we are looking for your feedback on that option here tonight, and there's more details about that option here on the boards. So again, this is just a close-up depiction of option 1. I'm not going to stay on this one for very long because we have a better map showing more details on our boards. But as you can see, this would cross Maryland 8 one way or another, either at grade or with a separate structure, run parallel to Maryland 8, Pier 1 Road, run near the Inn at Chesapeake Bay Beach Club, and then cross and connect into Terrapin Park. Again, here is a more zoomed-in version of option 4. It would start at the South Island Trail. It would run through county easements as we get north of the South Island Trail, cross over Thompson Creek, as we mentioned, run through the commercial and community areas that are south of US 5301, cross US 5301 to the west of Cox Creek, and then tie into the South Island Trail right out here. So we do have some comparison notes that we wanted to bring up. Again, this information is on the boards. When we look at connectivity, so the purpose of the study, are we connecting to the Cross Island Trail and the South Island Trail? When we consider connectivity, option 1 does that via Terrapin Park. Option 4 does that more directly, right from Stevensville to the South Island Trail. One of the things that option 1 does that option 4 doesn't is provide better connection to the Chesapeake Bay and to the park itself, which we know obviously is an important regional attraction. It also provides connections to the properties that are, as we mentioned, to the west of Maryland 8, which wouldn't be served by option 4. We do want to note here that you would have at-grade crossings of Pier 1 Road. It's not a particularly heavy traveled road, but you need to cross Maryland 8 in this option. So we have a couple of options to either do that at grade or as a second bridge crossing of Maryland 8, and we'd like some feedback on that as you look at the details on the boards. For option 4, one of the bonuses of this option is that it does connect a lot of existing land uses. So there's Stevensville and the community features that are north of 5301. There's a lot of, as we mentioned, residential properties and commercial properties that it runs through south of 5301, and then obviously ties into the South Island Trail. We mentioned again, there are a couple of at-grade crossings within Stevensville that we would have to consider, and that crossing of Thompson Creek. So when comparing the overpass itself, both bridges that would go over 5301, relatively similar types of structures. There would be a combination of a bridge itself plus ramps and retaining walls as you build up that structure to cross 5301. We talk about trail considerations. It's just a couple things to note here. For option 1, there's actually less new trail that needs to be built than you would have with option 4. The actual new portion is relatively, it's less. But there's quite a bit of upgrading of the existing trail network within Terrapin Park that we think would be necessary. So there's a lot of upgrading of existing trails that would have to be considered. So you get a total distance when you look at the connection between the Cross Island Trail and the South Island Trail. For option 1 is a little over 2 miles, whereas for option 4, it's just a little over a mile. So again, we talk about option 4 being a more direct, option 1 having the benefit of going through Terrapin Park. So some of the challenges I mentioned already. With option 1, one of the things that would have to be coordinated is whatever MDTA is doing with their study. This new overpass would have to accommodate what's being considered out of that study. At this point in time, MDTA has not identified a preferred alternative that they're planning to move forward with. They're in the process of determining that. The options that were laid out accommodate the widest footprint that they're considering, but nevertheless, with them not having a final study or final preferred alternative selected for their study, just note that that's an issue that would need to be coordinated. Similarly, because this new overpass will be pretty close to the Bay Bridge, it needs to accommodate MDTA's complex bridge operations. As you know, they run contraflow operation on the bridge. There's lane use control signals that are on 5301. Those need to be visible to all users on 301. We need to make sure our bridge doesn't impact that. In addition to this, as we mentioned, within Terrapin Nature Park itself, there has to be some investment to upgrade the trail network there to provide a fully paved trail through the park. For option 4, we mentioned the difficulty here is the secondary crossing of Thompson Creek. So there's not only a bridge structure, but that goes through sensitive environmental features that does lead to, you need to permit and coordinate with regulatory agencies, and there's costs that are associated with that. The other thing is that option goes through or along more private properties, so securing those easements or right-of-ways is something that needs to be considered. Okay, with that, that's the end of the presentation. There's information that's up on the board about how you can provide comments, but at this time, what we wanted to do is we invite you over to the boards. We'll have staff over here, and we can talk through in detail the options that we're evaluating. So thank you.